Hey Tony, it's Friday, and first off, to answer your question of the week, there's a lot. I'll, there's a lot that I think that we should have done better than we did, and I feel like that's going to be most of this video is some of my thoughts of what we should have done compared to what we did. So one of the biggest things was, first off, I think would have been a huge help, would have been not treating it as if it was just a hoax. The first few weeks of the pandemic were really vital, as they are in every pandemic, with your initial response. And we didn't really have one because it was a political discussion of, oh, is there actually a virus? Is there not actually a virus? And not much was accomplished. I mean, I remember, so when everything first started going a little wild was, at least here in New England, about middle of March, like beginning to middle of March, was when we were first just like, okay, this is coming, isn't it? And I know in our states, we were starting to get ready. Now, Massachusetts itself and Connecticut was actually pretty on the ball, as was New York. Massachusetts was a little bit delayed. It probably delayed about a week, and that was a huge week. Like we had, I thought that we've handled the virus really well, but in the initial first steps, I think we could have had a much more aggressive response to everything. So that's one thing. Another thing is that, I mean, there's been no leadership from the federal side, and I think that's one of the biggest issues is like you can have your states manage however they want, but it's not going to be as impactful as from like a top down type thing because you have the top down. The federal executive would have been able to actually step in and start mandating mask requirements as soon as the CDC came out, like realized that that was a good thing, or mandating stay-at-home orders, things like that, and that would have been a big step. Another big thing that I feel the federal government should have done that they didn't was actually listen to Dr. Fauci and listen to other experts in the field. There was still a lot of heeing and hawing for a long time of, oh, do these experts actually know what they're talking about? Should we actually listen to them? Should someone like Dr. Fauci, who spent his entire career studying um, epidemics, should we listen to him, or should we kind of think we have our own way of doing things? Obviously, this didn't work because we are in August now, so 5 months in, and the pandemic is nowhere near being over compared to other countries in which things have pretty well been managed. Um, another big thing that I think was a massive downfall, which again falls on the federal side, is the executive branch and President Trump didn't activate the I want to say it's the Defense Act, in which you can, from the executive, start controlling, like, okay, so we know that this state here is going to have a big issue with like running out of gloves, and using the Defense Powers Act, that's what it is. You can say, oh well, hey, this condom factory up in Pennsylvania can send a lot of their excess supplies to New York, and that would have been a big step towards making it so PPE was more accessible, involve like masks, gloves, and things like that would have been more accessible because, again, in those first few months, when hospitals were overflowing, like places like New York had to get ice trucks to put bodies in there because there was no space, and that's not sustainable in any way, shape, or form, and it obviously wasn't, considering where we're at now. So those are a couple of the steps I would have taken. Another really big one is mandating the masks. Now, the federal government really didn't mandate that; it was left to the states, and it's shown that mandating masks has been a big help to places that have been plagued by the coronavirus. And we haven't had a real unified response to that. And every single state has had their own ways. Like I've mentioned New England before, but like New England's response to the pandemic before, but New England and the Mid Atlantic, for the most part, did a pretty good job of heading off the virus. We shut down quickly. We mandated masks quickly. We started setting up social distancing guidelines, and you can see that the numbers now, we've had a bit of an uptick, at least in Massachusetts. We've had a bit of an uptick for this week as things have started to release a bit, or things have started to ease up a little bit, which is why Governor Baker came out today and said we are not moving forward into part 2 of phase 3. So we're going to kind of continue in our little bubble, for lack of a term, that we've made right now. And I actually think it's a good step. If we were pushing to reopen, we'd have issues like Florida or Texas or Alabama and places like that, where they were really quick to reopen and are now really rough places as far as the pandemic goes. Now, we are nowhere near the end of this pandemic at all. We're just not. There's no reasonable end in sight until there's a mass-produced vaccine. And the fact that the government's cut off funds to the World Health Organization and has started to negate a little bit of what the CDC can do is definitely not a recipe for success. And I think we're going to see this. And I also have real worries about the federal government's drive to kind of stop testing. I think testing is one of the only reliable ways to find out where we need to go and what we need to do and like what areas are being impacted more to actually set up a legitimate plan. Like Massachusetts has a lot of places that are doing free testing. Connecticut has a lot of places that are doing free testing. In fact, there's a massive testing facility just down the street from where I work. And steps like that could be a big help to states that are currently dealing with the worst of the pandemic right now. Again, Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, places like that. And there needed to be a real executive push to make sure that we get these things. But there hasn't been that. The executive branch has just recently started to take it seriously, and then that was promptly kind of kicked off 1 week later. And I really have no real hope that we're going to get out of this anytime soon. The vaccine is still at a minimum a year and a half away. And it's going to be a rough year and a half, 2 years, however long, until we get a reliable vaccine. And that worries me because, I know a lot of people who are particularly at risk. And the fact that all of these steps that could have been used to help stop the spread have not been used makes me really worried about what the next year and a half is going to be. Because we've lost valuable time. Honestly, I think we cannot say we've lost over 8-9 months of this, because we knew long before it was first really confirmed in America that it was going to be on its way. And there could have been a lot of steps that the executive branch could have taken to make sure that we didn't have that issue happen. But those steps weren't taken. There wasn't a mass travel order away from places that had been hit. There wasn't a active quarantine for people who had been in those countries, in those places that were hotspots before. And we still really don't have a plan. And that, I think, is what worries me the most, is that there's no plan other than it'll go away eventually, like magic, right? Because that's not how viruses work. We're going to be dealing with this for years now. So, Tony, my question for you is, what are your thoughts on Governor DeWine's potential positive test other than a negative test? So what was your opinion on that? And also, what was your opinion on the fact that he mandated masks like a lot of other states have? Tony, I'll see you on Wednesday. Later, bro.